Hey guys, tonight we step into the sweltering heart of 17th century Central Africa, where kingdoms rise and fall like waves against a stone cliff. The smell of smoke lingers in the air, not just from fires, but from gunpowder, scorched earth, and betrayal. You hear the clang of Portuguese armor as it moves through the jungle, and the hushed whispers of a royal court being outplayed by a woman not yet queen. Now, fair warning, you probably won't survive this. Not unless you're willing to outtalk a governor, outmaneuver an army, and outlast a dozen assassination attempts. Oh, and you'll need to master the art of smiling sweetly while plotting a rebellion. Easy bedtime stuff, right? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I want to know, where are you listening from? And what time is it for you? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are not born with a crown on your head. You're born into fire. Nzinga of Ndongo takes her first breath sometime around 1583 in the royal court of Ndongo, a kingdom wedged between rival tribes, Portuguese slavers, and the ever-watching eyes of the Jesuits. Your cradle rocks while outside. Raiders snatch people into slavery. The river carries not only fish and traders, but whispers of betrayal. Ndongo is powerful, yes, but faltering. And Portugal? Portugal wants everything: land, labor, loyalty. Your father is the Angola, a king hardened by endless war. He teaches you how to read a man's face before he opens his mouth. He speaks in riddles like all rulers must. And your mother, part of a lower ranked class, is wise but rarely welcomed into royal politics. Still, you learn. You always learn. As a little girl, you notice the men only stop talking when you enter the room, not because you're a threat, but because they don't see you as one. Not yet. One story, equal parts fact and folklore, says your name. Nzinga means twist or to be born breach. You entered the world feet first. According to local tradition, that means you'll always land on your feet, no matter how far you fall. Kind of poetic, considering how many cliffs your life is about to dangle off of. Your father favors you. That makes things complicated. He says you have your grandfather's fire in your blood. You train in politics, language, even battlefield tactics. Not usual for girls, but nothing about you is usual. Some say he whispers to his council that if he had been born a woman, he'd still have conquered this land. And maybe, just maybe, he thinks you could do what even he hasn't: outwit the Portuguese. But when he dies, everything unravels. Your half-brother Mbandi takes the throne. And let's just say he's not exactly the let's listen to Nzinga's advice type. He's paranoid, cruel, and terrified of your ambition. One story says he even kills your son to wipe out your bloodline. Historians still argue whether that's true or just court gossip. But either way, you get the message. He sees you as a threat. You back away. Not out of fear, but strategy. You know this isn't the moment. Not yet. Meanwhile, the Portuguese tighten their grip. They set up a puppet regime, demand tribute, and seize more slaves every season. They call your people savages, but make no mistake, they're the ones wielding cruelty like a science. The capital is surrounded. The land is fractured. The Portuguese trade muskets for loyalty, then turn that loyalty into debt. And behind every smiling missionary is a ledger counting bodies. It's around this time that Mbandi's nerves start to crack. He's losing ground, losing soldiers. He needs someone who can talk to the Portuguese, someone who can keep Ndongo from being swallowed whole. Guess who he calls? Yeah, you. Now imagine this. You, a princess once pushed aside, are now walking into a room full of European governors. They expect a scared African noblewoman, someone meek, perhaps illiterate, desperate to beg for scraps. What they get is Nzinga, sharp as obsidian, fluent in Portuguese, and dressed in state regalia that blends tradition with tactical flair. They offer no chair, so your attendant kneels so you can sit on her back like a living throne. That part? Completely real. It's a power move so bold, European scribes still gasp about it centuries later. You speak with such precision that they fumble. You flip negotiations on their head. The deal you secure that day doesn't just give Ndongo a breath of peace, it gives you the first taste of dominance. And here's the kicker: you agree to be baptized. You take the name Dona Ana de Souza after the governor's wife. And no, it's not because you found Jesus. It's because you found leverage. The missionaries think you've submitted. You smile, Accept the cross and use it to open political doors your enemies can't walk through. This moment, this seat on a human back, this carefully planned baptism, this dazzling dance of submission and defiance isn't just politics, it's war. And you've just declared it. You've sat on a human throne and stared down the Portuguese without blinking. You've returned to Ndongo with a deal inked in velvet and ink. But the ink doesn't dry. Nothing in this world stays settled. Not when men like your brother Mbandi are in charge. You watch him unravel, just a little more each day. His decisions grow erratic. He turns to purges, fearing plots in every shadow. You don't even flinch when he sends soldiers to watch your chambers. You smile, nod, and feed them goat stew with extra peppers. Let them sweat, but you don't rest. You listen. You memorize every deal he signs, every insult the Portuguese slip into treaties, every name whispered in the palace halls. You don't just observe, you decode. While others see chaos, you see patterns, weaknesses, leverage. Here's what they didn't plan for. You're not just your father's daughter, you're the court's secret mirror. You reflect everyone's secrets back at them. That governor who smiles too much? He's laundering slaves through Christian charity. That village chief so loyal to Portugal? He's running guns on the side. You collect these truths like daggers, and you never show your hand. Meanwhile, the Portuguese underestimate you, badly. See, they're fluent in muskets and missionaries, but diplomacy? That's where you turn their own tools against them. You learn to write letters that melt suspicion and bend treaties. You flatter egos while stabbing maps. One surviving letter begins with, "To the most illustrious and glorious Sir," and ends with subtle threats disguised as blessings. Historians still debate whether you wrote these alone or dictated them, but the tone is unmistakable. Gracious, barbed, impossible to ignore. And let's talk about language. You don't just speak Portuguese, you use it like a scalpel. You understand the weight of their words. You catch their mistranslations and missteps. One Portuguese envoy once claimed you mistook gift for tribute, until you corrected him with a grin and made him sign both. Most Ndongo nobles still view diplomacy as begging. You? You view it as performance art. Your court becomes a theater, every negotiation a stage. You dress in layers of symbolism, panther skins, feathered fans, Christian crosses tucked next to ancestral charms. When they ask you which god you serve, you say, whichever one holds the pen today. But knowledge isn't power without timing, and your moment is coming. The court starts whispering. She could lead, some say. She knows more than Mbandi, say others. These whispers swell until they reach your brother's ears. And then, he snaps. Whether from guilt or fear or both, Mbandi summons you one night, eyes bloodshot, voice cracking. He accuses you of treachery. Then, just like that, he hands you the reins. Not officially, of course. But symbolically, fatally, he's tired. And somewhere in that collapsing mind of his, he knows he's failed. A few months later, he's dead. Suicide, they say. Though even now, historians debate, was it despair? Poison? You? No one knows. Maybe not even you. But one thing is certain, Ndongo needs a leader, and the men around you? They're sharpening knives, preparing to fill the vacuum. But here's the twist. You're not interested in filling the vacuum. You intend to own it. Of course, there's a problem. Custom says a woman can't rule. Not alone. Not directly. Your enemies clutch this rule like a rosary. They appoint a male puppet ruler, someone with just enough bloodline to look legitimate and just enough cowardice to pose no threat. They expect you to kneel. Instead, you smile. You agree publicly to advise him. And then, in private, you run the kingdom like a warship. You sit at every council meeting. You issue orders on his behalf. You summon tribal chiefs and make sure they understand who's really in charge. One of your first acts? You start planning a new army, not of inherited loyalty, but of trained allegiance. You bring in mercenaries, train your own soldiers in Portuguese tactics. And here's the spicy part. You start recruiting women. Fierce, loyal, battle-tested women. You don't just open the court to them, you arm them. Your enemies laugh, then they bleed. One contemporary account claims your female guards were so loyal they would offer to die in your place. Another says they once disguised themselves as emissaries to poison a rival. Most of this, still debated. But one thing is clear, your court becomes a place where tradition bends and breaks under pressure. Meanwhile, your letters to Portugal change tone. You write fewer pleasantries, more conditions. Your advice becomes law. When Portuguese envoys demand more slaves, you stall, delay, distract. One time, you send them a treaty rolled in silk with a bouquet of poison tipped feathers. They never decode the message, but they do get food poisoning later. Coincidence? You also play divide and conquer like a seasoned card shark. You learn which governors hate each other, which Jesuits are corrupt, which generals are stretched thin. You begin to manipulate not just Ndongo, but Luanda, the heart of the Portuguese colony. You're not just surviving anymore, you're coiling, waiting, smiling, always. But deep in your eyes, they see it. Something sharp, something ancient, something ready. You've outplayed priests, survived your brother's madness, and run a kingdom from the shadows. But now, the shadows collapse. Because while you were building alliances and collecting secrets like silver coins, the world around you kept burning. Portugal didn't come to Central Africa to flirt. They came to own. And your delicate balancing act? It's teetering on a knife's edge. You wake one morning to find everything shifting, fast. The puppet ruler collapses, conveniently ill. Your claim to the throne faces open challenge. The Portuguese, now realizing you're not a cute Christian sideshow but a sovereign with a spine, back rival claimants. Tribes that once gave you cautious loyalty now start sniffing around new leaders, eager for better trade deals or fewer taxes. And then the worst blow. Luanda, the capital, the Portuguese colonial stronghold, tightens its grip. They start building forts, not wooden ones, stone ones. Muskets line their walls. Slaves are hauled in chains to their ports, and those treaties you once charmed into existence? Torn, ignored, mocked. They've decided Nzinga is dangerous. She's clever, too clever. She needs to go. So they send troops, not diplomats this time. Steel and fire. Your capital at Cabasa falls. Just like that. One season too dry, one alliance too slow, and suddenly your banners are burning. You flee. Not in disgrace, but in fury. With a corps of loyal guards and whatever supplies you can carry, you head north into the forested hinterlands. This is where most rulers would disappear. You've lost your capital, your court, your title in the eyes of the world. But you adapt. Now you live in exile, but not in despair. You retreat to a place the Portuguese fear to tread. Dense jungle, river-crossed, mosquito-haunted, impossible terrain. You set up a base, no, a ghost kingdom. Somewhere between guerrilla camp and royal court. And every soldier who swore they'd never kneel to a woman, they start kneeling. You keep ruling. No palace, no problem. You hold court under trees. You wear war paint and speak to chiefs in their own dialects. The myth of Nzinga grows bigger than the crown. One story from this period claims you used a burned-out tree stump as a throne and declared it stronger than stone. Another claims you fed a disloyal general to crocodiles. That one's less likely, but still, it keeps people in line. What's certain is this: from the forests, you begin to strike. Raids, disruptions, ambushes. You target slave routes, burn supply lines, and free entire caravans of captives. Your tactics aren't just revenge, they're recruitment. Every time you free someone from a Portuguese chain, they don't just follow you, they fight for you. The Portuguese start calling you the she-devil, a witch queen. One governor writes that you're more dangerous than any army. You'd think that might insult you. But no, you laugh, because fear is currency, and yours is gaining interest. Still, you need more than fear. You need a new base, a throne not just in myth, but in muscle. And so your eyes turn toward Matamba, a neighboring kingdom, rich in resources, split by dynastic drama, and just unstable enough to topple. Matamba isn't yours yet, but it's close. You send letters, ambassadors, bribes. You also send spies. The plan? Still forming, but you can already feel it in your bones. The next move will not be negotiation. It will be conquest. And you're ready. You may have lost Ndongo, but you're still Nzinga. And Nzinga is just getting started. You stand at the edge of a clearing, jungle behind you, Matamba ahead. You've come a long way from royal halls and silken treaties. Your face is marked with ash and old grief. The ground under your feet is foreign, but your resolve is not. You are no longer the exiled queen of Ndongo. You are the next ruler of Matamba. But how do you take a throne in a foreign kingdom that doesn't want you? You don't ask for it. You take it, with words as sharp as blades and blades as convincing as prayers. Your entry into Matamba isn't a grand siege. It's not thunder and fire. It's a slow, deliberate seduction of power. You promise sanctuary to dissidents. You smuggle food into starving villages. You hold secret councils under moonlight. And then, like a snake shedding skin, the old leadership collapses, just disappears. Historians still argue whether you arranged assassinations, married your way in, or simply walked into an empty palace and claimed the throne. Probably it was all three. What matters is this: you're in charge now. But don't think you relax. Nope, you go full reform mode. First up, the political system. Matamba had been ruled by a hereditary aristocracy, male-dominated and locked into tribal rivalries. You shred that script. You announce that lineage matters less than loyalty. Bloodlines bend. Your trusted warriors, men and women alike, are promoted to chiefs. Some Matamba elites squirm. You stare them down and invite them to leave. They don't. Then you rewire the economy. You redirect trade away from Portuguese Luanda and toward Dutch merchants on the coast. Tobacco, ivory, palm oil, you sell it all. And yes, you still engage in the slave trade because you have no choice. But you twist the knife back at Portugal by capturing their allies and auctioning them through your markets. That's not just profit, that's payback. Now, here's where the real drama begins. You get baptized. Again. This time, not as a helpless emissary begging mercy, but as a ruler negotiating from a seat of power. Your new baptismal name? Dona Ana de Souza, again, but now you wear it like a blade in your sash. You send letters to Lisbon, not in desperation, but in dominion. You remind the Portuguese that your Christian soul is still intact and that it might need protecting, diplomatically speaking. You write, I am a friend to those who respect my crown, and I am a lion to those who do not. The clergy is baffled. One Jesuit writes that you seem genuinely devout, though politically motivated. He's not wrong. And about your court? Let's just say it becomes one of the most fascinating mashups in early modern Africa. Picture this: Catholic crosses alongside sacred drums. Mass held in a mud brick chapel, followed by a war council in full leopard skin armor. 1 minute you're debating with Dutch envoys in Latin, the next you're dancing barefoot in a ritual fire circle to inspire troops. At one feast, according to rumor, you force a Portuguese merchant to drink palm wine from a skull-shaped goblet. He passes out. You declare him blessed. Maybe not true, but the story spreads like wildfire. And you don't correct it. Fear, symbolism, performance, it's all part of the arsenal. Your personal appearance becomes mythic. Tall, wrapped in crimson robes, with weapons crossed on your back and a fan in your hand. Your elegance and violence in one. And your military? Oh, your military evolves. You take Matamba's scattered militias and forge them into a single force. Trained. Disciplined. You issue uniforms, yes, uniforms, in a jungle kingdom. You standardize weapon drills, command daily formations, and punish desertion with swift justice. You create a warrior caste bound not by tribe, but by loyalty to you. And here's the wild part. Women serve openly in your army. Some as guards, some as commanders. One legend says your personal bodyguard was made up entirely of women who had lost family to slavers and took a vow to die before they let you fall. That's a lot of pressure, sure, but you've never been afraid of expectations. Meanwhile, the Portuguese, they're squirming. You've turned Matamba into a fortress, economic, political, military. You're not begging for peace anymore. You're offering it. And you know how to package that offer like a trap. You send a diplomatic envoy to Luanda, dressed to the teeth in silver and feathers. The message? Let's talk. And the real message? I can end this war, or I can feed it. They hesitate. You smile. Because diplomacy, now more than ever, is your favorite weapon. It doesn't stain your hands, but it breaks kingdoms just the same. So now you're queen of Matamba, ruling, rebuilding, and resharpening your blades. But here's the thing about power. Once you've got it, everyone wants to test it. And no one tests it more viciously than your own blood. Because back in Ndongo, the old kingdom you once fled, chaos still rules. Some relatives of yours, cousins, nephews, even an old aunt or two, start declaring themselves rightful heirs. They squabble, whisper, raise minor rebellions, then vanish just before your spies reach them. A few even cozy up to Portuguese governors in Luanda, thinking they'll get backing to steal the throne right out from under you. It doesn't work. Because you've turned court rivalry into a blood sport, and no one plays rougher than you. You start playing three-dimensional chess, keeping some enemies close, turning others against each other, and planting rumors like seeds. At least one of your rivals, Historians say, mysteriously died of natural causes during a meeting with one of your envoys. What kind of natural cause includes a dart to the neck? Well, that's up for scholarly debate. But while you're managing Matamba's rise and Ndongo's chaos, the Portuguese aren't sitting still. They're frustrated. Their forts in Luanda are under pressure. Their supply lines are harassed constantly. Their alliance network crumbling like soggy bread. They realize this Nzinga problem isn't going away. So they try to deal with it the only way they know how, through betrayal and brute force. First, they tried diplomacy, again. A series of governors write you letters laced with false humility and veiled threats. You respond in kind with velvet words and barbed promises. One line from your reply goes something like, "Peace will flow like the Kwanzaa River, provided your soldiers flow out of my land just as swiftly." Then come the spies. They send emissaries into your court who try to bribe your advisors. You let one succeed, then feed him false intelligence. The next month, a Portuguese convoy walks right into an ambush and loses most of its muskets. You send the survivors back with wine and a note. Next time, bring more. Your control over information is surgical. You keep everyone guessing. Are you planning peace? War? A marriage alliance? Another baptism? You do, in fact, entertain marriage offers. You flirt with the idea of marrying a powerful chief from a rival faction. Then, after the engagement feast, you arrest him. When asked why, you shrug and say, he mistook my invitation for an offer of equality. At this point, even your enemies admit, Nzinga doesn't just rule, she dominates. But you're not finished, because something darker is growing in the jungle. Rumors, whispers spread about your methods, about the rituals in your court, about your personal habits. Some say you sleep in a room full of snakes. Others claim you drink the blood of your enemies. One missionary writes that you practice heathen rites in secret, even after your Christian conversion. And then there's the infamous harem rumor. According to a Portuguese chronicler, not exactly a neutral source, you keep a personal harem of male concubines, dressed as women, who duel to the death for your affection. Most modern historians agree this is almost certainly made up, probably a projection of European fears and stereotypes, but you never deny it. Why would you? Fear is fuel. Let the colonizers think you're a sorceress. Let them think you're unpredictable, supernatural, ungovernable. Let them waste time being afraid while you move pieces across the board. But beneath all the myth-making, something else is happening too. Something real, something painful. Your family is gone. Your brother's dead. Your sisters, vanished or married off. Your son, long ago, taken from you. You rule alone now, surrounded by warriors and politicians and distant allies. But no kin. That solitude becomes your armor. You start speaking less in court, letting gestures and glances carry weight. Your commanders say you can silence a room just by adjusting your necklace. You wear silence like a crown. And when you do speak, people listen. One surviving Matamba official wrote later, she could make you feel honored and doomed in the same sentence. But for all the power, for all the victories, you're still surrounded. Portuguese forts grow stronger, their muskets more advanced, their ships faster. You know the next phase isn't just about war. It's about outlasting. So you begin shifting strategy again. You stop chasing victories. You start crafting stability. And you begin reaching out, not just to old allies, but to new kinds of friends. Because if diplomacy is a weapon, it's time to reload. Action 6. The jungle sings a different tune now. No longer are you the queen on the run, dodging muskets and betrayal. No longer are you whispering from tree-covered thrones or sending cryptic letters by torchlight. Now, you sit on a throne carved with your own symbols, not someone else's. Matamba isn't just a hiding place anymore. It's your empire, and it's about to become the stage for your boldest performance yet. But this act doesn't begin with drums. It starts with silence. You've been watching Portuguese activity on the coast, watching them build, expand, bleed your neighbors dry. You see them consolidating power in Luanda, tightening their grip over trade routes and suffocating smaller kingdoms into submission. You know they're planning something big, and that means you have to move first. So you reach out, quietly, to rebels, to the enslaved, to deserters, to anyone who still remembers a life before the Portuguese carved crosses into maps and called it salvation. You send word through the underground channels of Central Africa. Nzinga offers refuge. And they come. escaped slaves, scarred and seething, former mercenaries, eager for purpose. Even Portuguese soldiers who've grown tired of broken promises and rotting rations defect to your side. You call them all family, and you give them land. Yes, land. You establish a kind of proto-state within a state, a territory inside Matamba where freed people can live, farm, raise families, and train. Not just citizens, but warriors. You don't just offer sanctuary, you offer revenge with a pension plan. It works. Your army swells, not just in size, but in loyalty. These aren't hired swords anymore. These are people who would rather die than see the Portuguese flag fly over their homes again. They become your eyes, your ears, your muscle, and then you pull your next masterstroke. You reach out to the Dutch. Now, this is risky. The Dutch, like the Portuguese, are European colonizers, but they hate the Portuguese almost as much as you do. They're looking for ways to break Portuguese power in Africa, and you're the perfect chaos agent. So you negotiate. You send letters across the ocean, all charm and careful flattery. You offer trade routes, exclusive access to certain ports, and, crucially, military coordination. In return, you want guns, ammo, maybe even the occasional cannon or two. And they say yes. Suddenly, the woman they once called the Witch Queen is now a diplomatic partner to the Dutch West India Company. Not bad for someone who once ruled under a tree. But here's the fun part. You don't stop there. You leak word of this alliance to Portuguese spies. Let them panic. Let them imagine Dutch ships lining the coast, firing broadsides at their forts, whether it happens or not. Doesn't matter. Fear is the oldest form of leverage, and you're a master craftsman. Meanwhile, you continue building your image. You start holding more formal court sessions, complete with processions, rituals, and throne ceremonies that mix Christian flair with indigenous power symbols. You bless your generals with palm oil and incense. You decorate your halls with both crucifixes and ancestral masks. Jesuit guests are horrified and fascinated. One writes, her court is a contradiction made flesh. Exactly. You are the contradiction. A Christian who performs libations, a queen who fights like a rebel, a woman who commands armies, writes treaties, and rewrites gender rules while wearing a feathered crown. But behind the pageantry, you never stop sharpening your knives. One of your favorite generals, a former Portuguese slave, now trained in European siege tactics, draws up plans for retaking Ndongo. Not as a symbolic move, but as a permanent reclamation. It won't be easy. The terrain is brutal. The politics worse. You'll need absolute discipline, precise coordination, and total control of your forces. So you start training harder. You drill your soldiers in formations most African armies have never used. Line infantry, coordinated flanks, rolling retreats. You blend European tactics with jungle warfare, ambush with artillery. You create a fighting style that is, quite literally, Nzinga's war. The Dutch send observers. They're impressed. One even notes, her soldiers march more cleanly than ours. High praise, if slightly condescending. But you don't care, because soon it'll be time. The fires are lit, the banners stitched, your old home is calling. Ndongo is weak, and you are very strong. The queen is no longer in exile. The queen is coming home. The jungle quiets before a storm. You stand on a rise just outside the border of Ndongo, your old kingdom. The soil is red and cracked, as if it still remembers the footprints of your enemies. You're not the same woman who fled this place years ago. That Nzinga was a shadow queen. This Nzinga is a storm in human form. You don't sneak back into Ndongo. You march, brazenly, proudly, flanked by columns of soldiers in formation, men and women, shields polished, muskets gleaming. At the front, your banner. It doesn't show a cross, it doesn't show a lion. It shows you, Nzinga, seated on a throne of spears, one hand holding a sword, the other a dove. And behind you, thousands. Your army has swollen with freed slaves, exiled nobles, ambitious warriors, and perhaps most terrifying of all, the desperate. People who have nothing left to lose are often the most loyal soldiers. Now, let's talk about what makes this campaign truly wild. It's not just the weapons or the numbers, it's the planning. You don't just rush the capital. You squeeze it, starve it, smother it. You send scouts to cut off water routes, sabotage food convoys, burn fields around key fortifications so no one else can harvest them. Your war isn't just about conquest, it's about control. Portuguese forts along the Kwanzaa River fall like dominoes. Some surrender without a fight. Those governors remember your name from the last war and want no part in another. Others resist, sure, But they face not just your blades, but your strategy. You feign retreats. You leave paths open, then collapse them with ambushes. You let a convoy escape, only to trail it back to a supply hub and torch it at midnight. Your commanders say it's like watching a spirit at war, everywhere at once, with eyes in every tree. And somewhere in all this carnage, you do something no one expects. You negotiate. Yep, right at the height of your campaign, you send envoys to Portuguese leaders offering terms, not weak ones, your terms. You demand safe passage for your people, control of trade routes, an end to forced conversions, a seat at the diplomatic table, and the acknowledgement, not the permission, but the acknowledgement of your rule in Ndongo and Matamba. Now you're probably wondering, why would you offer peace when you're winning? Because you understand something that most warlords never learn. Winning a battle is easy. Holding a kingdom, that's harder. And diplomacy, that's where you really shine. The Portuguese are stunned. You've destroyed their trade routes, their alliances, and their pride, and now you're offering them a way to save face. Some accept, others stall. Still others try to double-cross you. Bad move. One governor invites your diplomat to negotiate over dinner. The next day, the governor is found foaming at the mouth. Historians argue whether you actually poisoned him or whether he choked on goat stew. Either way, your next envoy is greeted with a lot more respect. But your real prize is the people. As you march deeper into Ndongo, you offer more than victory, you offer restoration. You promise the old chiefs their titles back, if they pledge loyalty. You offer tax cuts, protection, freedom of religion, so long as they honor your leadership. You're not here to destroy Ndongo, you're here to reclaim it. And the people respond. Villages start flying your banners before your troops even arrive. Families drag out old drums and songs that haven't been heard since your father's reign. One elder says, "She is not a queen. She is the river come back to water the roots." And just when it seems everything is aligning, just when your foothold in Ndongo is solid, one final challenge appears. A rival faction rises in the north, backed by a Portuguese splinter group. A man claiming to be a divinely chosen king of both Ndongo and Matamba, who calls you a devil in a woman's skin. He begins raiding border towns, spreading propaganda, and undermining your authority. You don't hesitate. You ride out personally, not just to direct the battle, but to be seen. Your army chants your name. You wear red that day, blood red, and lead from the front. When the battle comes, it's quick, brutal. Fire, smoke, confusion. But your soldiers move like a tide, coordinated and furious. You don't just win, you erase your enemy. And in the ashes, you issue one final order. The rival king is to be buried in full regalia, with honors. Because you know what legends are made of, and you intend to control every part of yours, even your enemies. Ndongo is yours again. But the war? Not quite over, because now you must turn your gaze to the people still watching you, waiting to see if you can do more than conquer, waiting to see if you can lead. The drums of war fade. For now, the air is heavy, not with smoke or steel, but with expectation. You've reclaimed Ndongo, you've ruled Matamba, but here's the truth no one tells you. Taking a kingdom is thrilling. Holding it? That's exhausting. You sit on your carved wooden throne, surrounded by court advisors, military commanders, and chieftains whose loyalty is as fragile as morning mist. They all bow. They all smile. But you know half of them would poison your breakfast if they thought they could get away with it. And the other half? They just wait for someone else to do it. So you don't rest. You reinvent. You begin shaping Matamba and now Ndongo into a new kind of kingdom. One that reflects not just who you are, but who you need to be. That means breaking rules, making enemies, changing everything. First up, leadership structure. Traditional Central African kingdoms typically followed patrilineal succession, men inheriting from fathers, brothers, uncles. You rip that up like old parchment. In your new system, power isn't passed, it's earned. And gender? Irrelevant. You start placing women in visible, commanding roles, not just bodyguards or assistants, but generals, ambassadors, tax collectors, even judges. Some villages object. You smile politely, then reassign their resources until they change their minds. And when a particularly stubborn chief calls it an abomination, you send his daughter to govern in his place. She does a better job too. You also introduce new systems of tribute. Not random, not exploitative. You set clear guidelines, how much food, cloth, or manpower each region owes. You create fairness, and in return, you offer protection, order, a functioning kingdom. The people notice. They may not love you like a saint, but they trust you like a storm cloud, powerful, inevitable, and never confused about what it wants. Then there's your most radical reform, the Royal Guard. You take your mixed gender army and double down. You carve out a specialized corps of elite soldiers loyal to no one but you. They wear distinctive uniforms, some say blue and gold, others red and bone white, and train year round. And yes, many of them are women. These aren't figureheads, these are tacticians, warriors, executioners, if necessary. And every time they march through a village, children gather just to watch. But beyond spectacle, you also bring stability. Trade routes reopen, markets fill, fields bloom again. You establish partnerships with Dutch traders who find you far easier to deal with than the chaotic Portuguese. And here's a little known fact. You begin experimenting with written contracts. Yep, you and Nzinga start pushing your scribes to record deals, not just oral oaths. You understand that paper can trap promises in ways swords cannot. It's not widespread yet, but it's revolutionary. And scholars today debate whether your early push for documentation laid the groundwork for broader administrative reform across the region. While the cities settle, the countryside transforms too. You start mapping out safe zones, villages, and roadways where freed people can resettle. No one starves under your rule if they follow the rules. No one is kidnapped in the night. And no child is born into slavery on land you've marked with your banner. You can't undo the past, but you can chain it to the future and drag it somewhere better. Of course, the Portuguese notice. They send envoys again, this time a little more humble. One offers to establish peaceful trade relations. You keep him waiting outside your gates for 3 days, then accept, on the condition that you receive weapons and full diplomatic recognition. He blinks, swallows, agrees. Later, your advisors ask why you didn't demand more. You smile. Because I'm not done. Still, not everyone in your court is happy. Some whisper that you've become too foreign, that you talk too much about papers, about European deals, about diplomacy instead of conquest. They remember the warrior Nzinga, the exile queen, the blade in the jungle. But what they don't understand is that this is your final form. Not a warrior or a witch, not a widow or a diplomat, but a builder. A queen who doesn't just rise from the ashes, she plants a forest there. And when your people look to you now, they don't see desperation. They see structure, protection, a future. Because even storms must settle, but only after they've carved a new river into the earth. You wake before dawn now, not from fear, not from some ghost of exile or war, but because there's work to do. Ruling a double kingdom, Matamba and Ndongo, isn't glamorous. It's meetings, grain tallies, diplomatic dispatches that read like riddles. You sip bitter root tea while reviewing messages from the coast. Dutch traders want lower tariffs, some Jesuit is preaching rebellion, and 3 governors have claimed the same stretch of river. You sigh. Then you pick up your pen and dismantle the chaos with 10 precise lines. Because here's something most people don't realize. Your greatest weapon isn't a sword. It's your mind. Your letters are legendary, elegant, ruthless. You blend scripture with proverb, logic with threat. You can scold a king, charm a bishop, and baffle a general all in the same paragraph. One letter survives from this era, sent to the governor of Luanda. You call him my brother in Christ, while accusing him of enabling slavery, hypocrisy, and dishonor. Then you close with, may your soul find light before your ships lose the sea. Cold, beautiful, effective. The Portuguese don't know what to do with you. You're not rebelling, you're not surrendering, you're governing, and better than most of them. Your population's growing, your economy's stabilizing. And here's the kicker. Your territory is becoming a refuge. Escaped slaves whisper your name like a spell. Nzinga, queen of the forest, lady of fire, the woman who broke her chains and now breaks others. One escaped captive reaches your capital after weeks in the jungle. He weeps at your feet. You lift him up and say, stand, you're free now. That's all that matters. That moment spreads. It becomes a myth. But in your kingdom, myth is policy. You begin enshrining freedom in law. Anyone who reaches Matamba's heartland from foreign bondage, automatically free. If they're caught again and sold, you hang the seller. even if it's a chief, especially if it's a chief. Of course, this puts you at odds with everyone who profits from slavery, which at this point is most of Europe and half of Africa. But you've made peace with contradiction. You still trade slaves when you must, to arm your people, fund your reforms, but you fight to protect your own like a lioness. Historians still argue whether you were an abolitionist in intent or just clever in tactics. But your people, they know one thing. You gave them a choice, and choice is power. Your foreign policy evolves too. You deepen ties with the Dutch, though never trust them fully. You play them off against the Portuguese, keeping both guessing, both needy. You even toy with sending emissaries to England, though they never quite materialize. You hold audiences with envoys from as far as the Congo and the interior plains. When they arrive, they don't just see a queen. They see the queen. Your court becomes a showcase of fusion, European court etiquette fused with Angolan rhythm, Portuguese floor tiles beneath sacred masks. You hold mass with incense and singing, then step into a war council wearing leather armor and a feathered headdress. You are both. You own the contradiction. And then, unexpectedly, the world around you begins to tilt again. The Dutch? They're losing power. In Europe, wars shift, fortunes collapse, and suddenly, your reliable foil, the balance you've maintained between colonial enemies, starts to crumble. Luanda changes hands again. New Portuguese governors arrive, some brutal, others desperate. They beg for trade deals, then threaten war, then offer you titles. One offers to name you Queen of the Christian Peoples of Angola. You send back a fruit basket. This isn't flattery anymore. It's strategy. You understand that titles from colonial powers are traps dressed as tributes. You don't need validation. You need time. Because you feel it. You're getting older. Not weaker, never that, but slower. Your hands ache some mornings. You delegate more. You speak less. Your eyes narrow when people start talking succession, but you don't snap. You just listen and prepare. Because even storms need successors. Even Nzinga knows this won't last forever. But while it does, you rule with precision, with grace, with the power of someone who has nothing left to prove. You've already etched your legacy into the land. Now, it's time to preserve it. You sit at the head of the great hall, polished wood cool beneath your fingers, the scent of burning palm oil floating in the air. Outside, the rain drums steadily on the clay roof, but inside, silence. The council waits. They want your decision. And as usual, you already know your answer. This dispute is like 100 before it. Two chiefs arguing over land that's changed hands too many times, trying to twist old maps into new claims. But you cut through it like a knife. Divide the land, share the water. If either breaks this peace, I will reclaim it all. They bow, not because they agree, but because they remember what happens to those who don't. This is what your rule looks like now. Not flaming arrows or jungle ambushes. Law. Order. The heavy crown of authority, not just the thrill of rebellion. You've become something no one expected. A system. A queen who built not just thrones, but scaffolding. Your legal reforms deepen. You formalize succession rules, matrilineal and merit-based. No more accidental kings with a good bloodline and a bad brain. You create a rotating council of senior women advisors, elders, priestesses, warriors. You call it the Circle of Flame. They advise you. They challenge you. Sometimes they outvote you, and you let them. That alone, revolutionary. Historians still debate whether this structure endured long after your death, but what's clear is this. Nzinga didn't just rule, you planted roots. But your reach doesn't stop at home. Beyond Matamba and Ndongo, you begin projecting influence. You send gifts to neighboring rulers, bolts of cloth, gold beads, and sometimes advisors. Advisors trained by you. Slowly, other courts start adopting your policies. Trade protections, land rights for freed people, structured taxes. Some call it flattery. You know better. It's Nzingaism, political influence by suggestion, not domination. The Portuguese hate it, of course, but they can't stop it. Their grip has weakened, their armies are stretched, and your alliances, though fragile, hold. You even flirt with religious diplomacy. You allow more missionaries into your cities, provided they teach local languages and obey your rules. You build a church in your capital, but you also fund traditional shrines. When questioned, you smile and say, God speaks many tongues. I just want to hear them all. One Jesuit writes in frustration, she is a woman of deep contradictions, yet I cannot deny her faith is strong, even if it is never quite ours. You keep your own chapel, private and austere. You pray at dusk. Whether to the Christian God, your ancestors, or both, no one knows. And that's the point. You are a spiritual Rorschach test. People see what they need in you. And perhaps the strangest part, so do you. You begin writing more, dictating journals, letters not to kings, but to posterity. You speak to future rulers, to women who will face the same trials. If they say you are too clever, one line reads, remind them cleverness wins wars no brute survives. You hold audiences with young girls, train them in strategy, literacy, public speaking. One becomes your chief translator, another commands a garrison. A third becomes your historian, tasked with preserving your memory, not as myth, but as method, because you've seen what time does. It erases women first, so you act faster. You commission carvings of your life, tableau in wood, not marble. Realistic, brutal. There's one of you standing above a battlefield, one of you holding a chained envoy by the ear. And yes, one of you disguised in male armor, holding court during wartime. You don't hide the hard parts. You enshrine them. You even record your defeats, because a ruler who only tells victories isn't a ruler. She's a storybook. And you are history. But even now, with your legacy written in wood and blood and law, you feel the ticking behind your ribs. Time is shifting, not ending, but bending. Your nights grow quieter, your mornings slower. You find yourself walking more slowly through the gardens, listening to the wind. You wear your armor less, your beads more. Not because you're weaker, but because you've built enough to not need the blade anymore. And still, there's one last thing you haven't done. One last move. Because as much as you've outlived your enemies, survived betrayal, and ruled through eras, one question remains. What happens when Nzinga is gone? You rise earlier these days, not out of urgency, but because the world feels quieter at first light. The breeze brushes through the banana leaves like a whispered prayer, and the bird song reminds you of a time when you ruled from a tent, not a palace. But now you sit on stone, beneath banners, crowned by legacy, and you begin preparing for your greatest challenge yet. Succession. Not a war, not a siege, not diplomacy with trembling Europeans. No, this is harder. Choosing who comes after you and ensuring they don't unravel everything you built like it was made of straw. You've outlived almost everyone who knew you as anything but a legend. Your advisors now speak with reverence, sometimes hesitation. They call you Mother of the People, Lioness of Two Kingdoms. Even the Hand of God, which, frankly, makes you roll your eyes. But you don't correct them, because the truth is, it's useful. Reverence buys silence. Silence buys time. And you need time. Because Matamba and Ndongo aren't just surviving, they're thriving. But they're also vulnerable. The structures you've put in place, laws, courts, markets, alliances, they live and breathe through people. If those people betray the system, everything falls. So you begin a quiet vetting process. You start watching, not the loudest, but the steadiest. The ones who ask questions, the ones who listen more than they speak, the ones who remember your actions, not just your victories. You gather them. Some are family, some not. One is a girl you rescued from slave traders 10 years ago. Now she speaks 4 languages and commands her own squadron. Another is a former merchant's son with a genius for logistics. He once reorganized your entire tax registry using nothing but pebbles and string. You don't declare anyone heir just yet. That would start a frenzy. Instead, you train them all. You start a council, secret at first, then open. They sit in your shadow, not as replacements, but as roots. You teach them everything. How to negotiate with liars, how to deliver mercy without appearing weak, how to hold a sword in one hand and a treaty in the other and know which one to use. You stage mock crises, fake rebellions, fabricated trade disputes. You watch how they respond. Who panics? Who freezes? Who adapts? And through all this, your kingdom keeps spinning. The Dutch begin pulling out of parts of Africa. Fewer ships, less influence. The Portuguese, meanwhile, continue clawing for relevance. A new governor arrives in Luanda, full of pomp and apology. He invites you to a summit. You decline the invitation, but send a gift, a carved figurine of yourself with a removable head. A little joke or a warning. You're still watching. But you're also shifting. The Nzinga of fire and teeth has become Nzinga of strategy and stone. You begin formalizing your legacy. You order your laws copied into leather-bound volumes, distributed to each regional governor. You establish a network of messengers, fast runners with memorized codes, who carry news between your two capitals in under 3 days. You commission a map, drawn to scale, of your entire realm. It's beautiful and terrifying to your enemies because it doesn't just show rivers and borders, it shows structure. Permanent, deliberate Nzinga structure. And while all this unfolds, you finally begin to allow your people, just a little, to dream. You fund schools. Not many. Not grand, but enough. Young children, boys and girls, are taught to read, to reckon numbers, to speak Portuguese and Kimbundu. You tell them stories, not of saints or kings, but of farmers who outwitted warlords, of mothers who walked days to rescue children, of people who turned loss into power. You end each story the same way, and because of them, we stand. One night, while walking through the garden, one of your young advisors asks, "What happens if they forget?" You pause, then say, "They won't forget me, but they might forget why I mattered." So you keep working, because legacy isn't marble statues or embroidered robes. Legacy is systems that survive your bones, and you intend for yours to last. But still, the questions press harder. The whispers grow bolder. Who will rule next? Who can? And one morning, the answer doesn't come in a prophecy. It's not written in blood or smoke. It's a quiet realization. You choose someone, not because they're perfect, but because they understand. Understand what it means to bend but not break, to fight without rage, to rule without apology. You don't announce it yet, but you begin walking more slowly at public ceremonies, standing behind them just a little less. You let them shine, because soon the world will need to believe it was always going to be this way, that Nzinga planned this all along. And they're not wrong. You always had a plan. The sun feels heavier now, not hotter, just weightier, like it's pressing down instead of shining. You still rise each morning, still drink your bitter tea, still walk your gardens with the same quiet authority. But your bones whisper truths your pride won't say out loud. You're aging. Your gait is slower. Your eyes, sharper than ever, grow tired sooner. The voice that once silenced generals now curls into silence by twilight. And though no one dares say it aloud, you see it in the eyes of your people. The worry, the watching. They wonder, what happens when the storm finally sleeps? But you aren't afraid. You've lived more lives than most people can imagine. Warrior, diplomat, fugitive, Kujin, builder. Now, you prepare to become something else. Memory. You begin a final round of visits. Not to cities, but to people. You go to the highlands where your mother once walked. You sit with the grandchild of a servant who saved your life during the first rebellion. You offer thanks, not just with words, but with land, with legacy. Everywhere you go, people gather. They don't cheer like before. They watch, reverent, hushed, as if they know the end of something enormous is drawing near. And you accept their reverence with a steady nod. Because your life has always been about control. And even now, you won't let time write the ending for you. You gather your council, your circle of flame, your generals, your chosen heir. You speak not of power, but of continuity. You remind them what you've built. Not just kingdoms, but an idea that a woman can rule, that fear can be reshaped into freedom, that dignity doesn't come from birth or title, but from refusal. Refusal to bow, to break, to disappear. And then you begin releasing. You delegate more authority to your successor. Let them negotiate trade. Settle disputes. You start referring to our rule, not my rule. The transition is subtle, graceful, intentional, because that's the only way you've ever known how to move, with intention. You order a final audit of your realm, not for show, but for truth. You want to know how your people live. Are they safe? Are the taxes fair? Are their hidden wounds still bleeding beneath the surface? The reports come back, not perfect, but better. Your roads are watched, not raided. Your markets hum with sound. Your freedmen's villages are thriving. And your guards, they still stand straight when you pass, not because they fear you, but because they love you. One of them, just a boy when you first took back Ndongo, kneels and says, "My mother taught me your name before she taught me her own." You touch his cheek, say nothing, but your eyes sting. Because that's it, isn't it? Not war, not power, but remembrance. And even the Portuguese, your oldest enemies, begin writing differently now. One Jesuit calls you the most formidable woman in Africa, another, a lion wrapped in silk. They still don't understand you, but they know better than to dismiss you. In Luanda, traders whisper that no new treaty will last unless it bears your seal. And in Lisbon, royal letters arrive, less arrogant, more curious. One refers to you as our royal sister in the south. You smile at that. Too late, but still satisfying. And then one quiet morning, you stop leading court. Your successor begins standing at the center, giving orders, holding meetings. People resist at first, instinctively looking to you. You simply nod at the new voice, and they follow. That's how you know. You've done it. You've outlived not just your enemies, but your era. You've created something that doesn't need you, which means it might just survive you. That evening, you return to your private chamber. You remove your jewelry piece by piece. The bracelets, the rings, the carved ivory necklace you've worn since you first fled Ndongo. You set them aside, and you breathe. Not as Queen Nzinga, not as the warrior or the ghost who haunted the jungle, just as you. And in that silence, you finally feel what you've never allowed yourself to feel before. Tired. Not defeated. Not broken. Just ready. Because you've ruled for decades. You've turned the blade of colonization into your own spear. You've reshaped the map, redefined womanhood, and rewritten your people's future. What more is there? Now comes the final chapter. Not an ending, but a softening, a letting go. And when your people next gather in the capital, they find not a throne, but a circle, a flame that still burns, and the shadow of a queen whose absence fills the room more powerfully than her presence ever did. The rain doesn't stop for royalty. It drums steadily outside your window, cascading off the palm-thatched eaves of your palace, sliding down the stone walls built with hands that once carried swords. You lie in bed, not because you must, but because for the first time in your life, you can. You've earned stillness. Servants move softly now. The court speaks in murmurs. Matamba is no longer ruled by your voice, but by your echo. Your successor has taken their place with a confidence you shaped. They preside over council. They sign treaties. They walk through the same halls you carved from wilderness and carry the same iron in their spine. And you watch. From a distance, from a shaded veranda or the quiet of your garden. You see the way people greet your heir now, not with hesitation, but respect. It worked. Your system is holding, but the world still spins with chaos, even without you at the helm. Portuguese ships still crawl the coastline like silver beetles. There are whispers of new alliances forming in Europe, of treaties that might redraw maps again. You receive letters from the Dutch, polite, clipped, cautious. They ask your opinion on a border dispute. You smile and send back a single line. It is no longer my decision to make. A lie, of course. You could still change the course of rivers with a raised eyebrow. But you don't. Because queens don't just build kingdoms. The wise ones know when to leave them standing. Your body continues to change. You rest more. The aches last longer. You stop traveling outside the capital. But your mind, sharper than ever. You dictate reflections to your scribe, who, by the way, is 20, sarcastic, and completely unafraid to correct you. You adore her. You've begun calling her memory, because that's what she's becoming. The record of everything you refuse to let time steal. You dictate stories you've never told before. About your first failed mission to Luanda, where a misstep nearly cost you your brother's life. About a priest who once tried to baptize you with dirty water, and you dumped the whole basin on his head. About the night you slept under a crocodile skin, trembling, unsure if you'd live till morning. She writes it all down, with ink and patience. Why now? She asks. And you say, because they'll call me a legend, and legends get twisted. I want them to remember I bled like everyone else. Some nights, your sleep is filled with dreams, familiar ones, forests with no end, fires at your back, your father's voice calling out from a distance. And sometimes, strangest of all, you dream you're still on that mat, lifting yourself up onto your servant's back in Luanda. But this time, you don't feel defiant. You feel tired, like you've carried enough weight for one lifetime. News reaches you of uprisings in distant regions, skirmishes, power struggles, but your heir handles them. Efficiently, firmly. You send a note of praise, not advice, because even in rest, you remember what it's like to have a mentor who won't let go. You won't be that shadow. And so you begin preparing something even more difficult than succession. Your farewell. Not a funeral plan. Not quite, but something more intimate. You order a simple burial site prepared beneath a baobab tree near the river where you once held a secret court during the early days of war. You instruct your guards not to mark it with statues, but with a circle of stone, open, empty, eternal. You write a final letter, addressed not to a ruler, but to your people. It begins, "To the ones who lived when I would not let us die." It ends with, "The kingdom is yours now, keep it free." Your scribe cries as she writes those words. You don't, because there's peace in knowing you've left something better behind. There's peace in knowing they will speak your name, not out of fear, but out of memory. And memory is stronger than marble. You no longer count days. Time softens into sensations now. The warmth of sun on your cheeks, the weight of a carved walking stick in your hand, the distant laughter of children echoing through the palace walls. You sit beneath the shade of a fig tree in your garden, the same garden you once redesigned to match the constellations. One of the stars, yes, you named it for yourself. Subtle? Not quite, but who's going to argue with you? Birds nest nearby. You watch them flit from branch to branch, feathers catching light like fragments of memory. A breeze carries the scent of mango and firewood, and for a moment, the scent brings you back to a battlefield. Matamba's border, maybe. You blink the vision away. You've already written that chapter. Now you're watching it be rid. Your heir rules well. Not like you. No one rules like you, but with strength, clarity, and kindness where it's deserved. They make different decisions, sometimes bolder, sometimes softer. You resist the urge to interfere. Instead, you keep your silence like a queen keeps a blade, ready but hidden. Sometimes old enemies send messengers asking for Nzinga's counsel. You greet them with hospitality, feed them roasted plantains and tamarind, then send them to your heir. Message received. The queen still watches, but her hand is no longer on the sword. And still, your legend grows. Poets sing about your battles in markets. Children dress like you during festival days, wrapping blankets as capes, swinging toy spears. One girl sneaks into the palace gardens just to see you. When the guards find her, you wave them off and ask the child, "Why are you here?" She says, "Because you're not real, and I wanted to see if you breathe." You laugh. Take her hand. Show her your scar from the time you fell off a horse while fleeing a trap. "Real enough," you say, and she runs back to her village, shouting, "She's alive!" You wonder how long they'll say that, because slowly, gently, the body fails the mind. Your walks become shorter, your appetite fades. The bitter root tea sits half finished on your tray. You sit longer under the fig tree, sometimes asleep, sometimes simply listening, to the earth, to the breeze, to the quiet. One night, your scribe comes to you with a stack of letters, notes from villages, requests from governors, prayers from mothers. You wave them away. "Burn them," you say. "If they still need me, they'll figure it out." You've let go of the wheel, but not of your words. Your final journal entries are strange, not political, not strategic, but intimate. You describe the way rain sounds on copper roofs, the look of moss creeping up palace steps, the taste of your mother's cooking, long forgotten, suddenly remembered. You even write a lullaby. No one knows why. You stop attending court altogether. A rumor starts that you've gone blind. Another that you've been speaking to spirits. Neither is fully true, but neither is wrong either. Because you're crossing, not dying, crossing. And while the kingdom moves forward, grain harvested, taxes collected, soldiers trained, your own world becomes smaller, quieter, more complete. You ask for one last audience. Not with your heir, not with your counsel, but with your oldest friend, the woman who once carried you on her back in Luanda. She's nearly as ancient as you now, but her laugh hasn't changed. You sit side by side, silent for a long while. Then you say, "We didn't die." She grins. "No, we became impossible." And in that moment, everything is still, because that's what you are now. Not just a queen, not just a warrior, but something between breath and story. Not a monument, but a pattern. They will study you, fight over your truth. Some will call you ruthless, others divine. Historians still argue whether your final years were spent in quiet regret or silent triumph. You let them argue. You know the truth. Your last act is to summon your successor. You place in their hand the pendant you wore into battle all those years ago, the one shaped like a bird in flight. "Not a crown," you say. "Too heavy. This is better." It reminds you that you don't rule from the sky. You fly close to the people. Then you take their face in your hands and say the one thing you haven't said in 60 years. "I'm proud of you." That night, the fig tree rustles louder than usual. The sky is clear. The stars align, and Nzinga, daughter of Ndambi, sister of Kifunji, queen of Matamba and Ndongo, destroyer of empires, maker of kingdoms, closes her eyes. Not in surrender, but in peace. There is no trumpet when you pass, no violent thunderclap, just silence. A silence so deep it settles over the palace like a second skin. The fig tree, under which you spent your final years, drops a single fruit, soft and unremarkable, onto the earth. Your heir receives the news with no tears, only stillness. Then, with steady hands, they call the circle of flame. They light the ceremonial fire. No one wears black. Instead, they dress in your colors: deep red, soil brown, and the gold of dawnlight on river water. The morning begins, but it's not weeping. It's remembering. Villages across the two kingdoms sing your name, not as loss, but as pulse. A beat, a rhythm that doesn't die. They chant, Nzinga the storm, Nzinga the flame, Nzinga the builder. A full moon rises that night. Some say they see your shape in it, back straight, spear in hand, arms open, a warrior still on watch. Your heir stands before the crowd the next morning. No speech, just a gesture, arms lifted the way you used to do. It's enough. The people cheer, not because they've forgotten you, but because you taught them how to move forward. And then a strange thing happens. The Portuguese send a letter, a formal one, addressed not to your heir, but to you. It offers sincere regrets for your passing and calls you a monarch of unparalleled strength and wisdom. It is signed by the King of Portugal himself. Your heir reads it, smiles faintly, and places it in the fire. Because no paper can carry the weight of what you were. And you remain. In wood carvings in marketplaces, in the laws that guide Matamba's courts, in the fields where freed people plant cassava, in girls learning to read beside shrines built in your honor. They say the baobab tree near your resting place never loses its leaves now, that it hums when storms approach, that mothers bring their daughters there and whisper, "She walked so you could stand." But here's the truth they rarely say aloud. You didn't just defy Spain. You didn't just resist Portugal. You didn't just outwit generals, outlast governors, or outmaneuver traitors. You rewrote the rule book. You made power bend to you. Not with blood alone, but with brilliance. You turned diplomacy into a weapon, language into a shield, and gender into a ghost that haunted every man who underestimated you. And now they speak your name in three tones: fear, respect, and awe. Because Nzinga didn't fade. She became foundation. And tonight, as your people sleep beneath the stars you once named, they are not afraid. Because the queen still walks, if not in flesh, then in the law, in the rhythm of trade routes, in every hand that grips power with wisdom. You did it. You didn't survive history. You became it. So now, listener, as you lie there in the hush of your own room, think of the queen beneath the fig tree. Think of the weight she carried, crowns, weapons, betrayals, dreams, and how gently she laid them down. Feel the quiet power in your breath, the slow rhythm of your chest rising and falling like tides. You are part of her legacy now, simply by remembering. Close your eyes and imagine that carved wooden hall, the scent of earth and fire, the murmur of council voices in the distance. See the flicker of torchlight on polished stone, the place where Nzinga once sat, and still does, in every woman who leads, every person who dares to build while the world breaks. Let the storm of her story pass over you now. Let it settle into calm. Let it root, because sleep, like history, needs peace to grow. So soften your jaw, let your shoulders drop, let the blanket of night pull gently over you. You are safe. The queen has gone to rest, and because of her, you can too. End of script. Sweet dreams.